We will cover the topic of robotics in some detail in this session. And I'm going to refer to these notes which I already gave to you. So here you can see a robotic manipulator. There is a base and there are three links here which are labeled as arm. There is a wrist and there is what is called an end effector. The end effector can be a tool for machining. It can be a gripper for gripping something just like human hand. So that is what is called end effector. And here you can see these links are labeled according to human body in some sense, like arm and wrist. So that is sometimes done. So uh, in some configurations, link can be considered to correspond to human anatomy. So just like we have waist, arm, shoulder and wrist. So similarly, sometimes a correspondence is drawn between the robotic manipulator and human body, and different parts are labeled in this way. So here you can see those are labeled as arm and wrist. Now, what is the purpose of arm and wrist? The purpose of arm is to position uh, the manipulator. Okay. Just like we have a joint at the shoulder, a joint at the elbow, so we use these joints to position our wrist at a particular location. So the purpose of arm is positioning, and the purpose of wrist is orientation. I'm going to show you a drawing of wrist later on, but wrist helps in orientation and arm helps in positioning. So let us go through these points. To position and orient a body in 3 dimensions, 6 degrees of freedom are required. You already know this. 3 degrees of freedom are required for positioning at any point x, y, z in 3D. You need 3 degrees of freedom, and 3 degrees of freedom are required for orientation. Okay. And a manipulator that has at least 6 degrees of freedom and allows positioning as well as orientation in 3D, that is called a spatial manipulator, and it can span 3D space. In contrast, there can be a planar manipulator which spans only 2D space. Okay. Now, manipulators can also have more than 6 degrees of freedom, and manipulators with more than 6 degrees of freedom are called redundant manipulators. So you may ask why they have more than 6 degrees of freedom, because 6 degrees as such are sufficient for positioning and orientation in 3D. So why should we have more than 6 degrees of freedom? The idea is to increase the dexterity. So what that means is, when you want to position the manipulator at a particular point, if it has more than 6 degrees of freedom, then there will be multiple ways to reach that point. Just like we can touch our nose moving our arm from the front, and we can also try to touch it moving from behind our back. Okay, so if it has more degrees of freedom, then the manipulator will have such dexterity, so it can avoid, like if there is an obstacle in the way, it can avoid that obstacle and use an alternative path for positioning. So that sort of thing. Okay, so it adds to dexterity. Now let us talk about various arm configurations. I already explained the purpose of arm is to position the wrist. Okay, and it has to have, for a spatial manipulator, it has to have at least 3 degrees of freedom. Okay, and there are many arm configurations, but there are 4 basic configurations, and they are called Cartesian or rectangular, cylindrical, polar or spherical, and articulated arm. Okay, and I'm going to show you a drawing of them. But basically, a Cartesian arm has 3 prismatic pairs. A cylindrical has 1 revolute and 2 prismatic. A polar has 2 revolute and 1 prismatic, and an articulated arm has three revolute pairs. Okay, so I'll refer you to some pages from the book. Okay, so I already gave you these scanned pages. So it has description of Cartesian or rectangular configuration, and you can see an a picture here. So you can see this whole thing is called arm, and it has 3 degrees of freedom, and there are basically 3 prismatic pairs. Okay, and by moving the links using these degrees of freedom, you can span a cuboid type of shape. Okay, so this is called here work envelope, and the region inside this is the workspace, which can be spanned by this arm. Okay, so this is Cartesian arm. There is another example of Cartesian arm here. You can go through this. Okay, then there is this cylindrical configuration, and you can see here it has one revolute pair, and this first link, this vertical link, can rotate. Okay, because there is a revolute pair, and then there are 2 prismatic pairs, and the workspace for this is a cylinder. Okay, so this is cylindrical arm. Then it shows polar or spherical configuration, and in this you can see there are 2 revolute pairs and 1 prismatic pair, and corresponding to this workspace is like a hemisphere you see here. So this is spherical arm, and then articulated arm, which has all revolute pairs. So you can see this, it has 3 revolute pairs. All of them are not in the same plane. If they are in the same plane, then it will become a planar mechanism. Okay, so they are in different planes, and you can also see the workspace corresponding to this. And then there are other configurations also. This one is called Scara configuration. You can go through them. Okay, so that is about arm, the purpose of which is positioning. Okay. Okay, after arm there is a wrist. The purpose of wrist is to orient the end effector. I already explained that, and it needs at least 3 degrees of freedom. Actually, it doesn't need more than 3 degrees of freedom. So our wrist will always have 3 degrees of freedom. Those are sufficient for orientation, and it requires only rotary joints because the purpose is just orientation. And I'll show you a picture of 3 degrees of freedom RPY wrist, that is called roll, pitch and yaw wrist. So you can see that wrist here. So there is arm, and after arm what follows is the wrist. You can see it has 3 revolute pairs, and corresponding to that it has 3 degrees of freedom for orientation, not for positioning, just for orientation. And various motions that it allows are called roll motion. Okay, we have similar names for ship and plane, this roll, pitch and yaw. So there is roll motion from side to side for this revolute pair. There is a pitch motion which takes the end effector up and down corresponding to this revolute pair, and then there is a yaw motion which takes end effector side to side in the horizontal plane based on this figure. So if you look at our arm, you can see that, not our arm, sorry, our wrist. You can see in our wrist also we have this roll motion, pitch motion and yaw motion. Okay, and we use those motions for proper orientation so that we can lift or touch a particular project. So apart from positioning, orientation is also important. So that is provided by the wrist. Okay, so that is basically what a robotic manipulator is. Now, the purpose here is to, of course, we want the manipulation. We want our manipulator to position in a particular way, to orient in a particular way. So what is required to do that? So first of all, we need a mathematical description of position and orientation of links in space. Okay, we need to have a way for mathematical description of that. And to do that, what is done is a frame is attached to each link. So you can see here there is a base and there are three more links. The base is generally called link 0. So we don't start from link 1. We label the base as link 0, and then you have link number 1, link number 2, link number 3 in this figure. And to each link a frame is attached. So you can see there is a base frame which is called frame 0. This frame is attached to the base. Okay, there is frame 1 which is attached to link 1. There is frame 2 which is attached to link 2. Frame 3 is attached to link 3. Okay, so like that we have a frame, a coordinate frame attached to each link. Now if we take a point A, as you see here, as this arm moves, then the description of point A in coordinate frame 3 will not change, because coordinate frame 3 is attached to link 3 and the coordinate frame moves with the link. Okay, moves with this particular link. So there is no change in the position of point A in coordinate frame 3. Okay, but see, that is not what is important for us. We would like to know how the position of point A is changing in the base frame, frame 0, which is actually a fixed frame because it is attached to the base which is fixed. So for us, what is important is position of point A in base frame, but we don't get that directly. We attach a frame to each body and then we work out some mathematics so that we can have the position of A in frame 0. So the problem here is, given the description, by that I mean the position, given the position of point A in frame number 3, okay, corresponding to this figure, what is the description of point A in frame 0? Okay, that is our question. Okay, how should we do that? So this is called mapping frame from one frame to another. And so that is the basic problem, and after some more introduction of the topic, we are going to dive into this basic question, that given the description of a point in one frame, what will be the description of that in some other frame? Okay. And when we are solving the problems of the robotics, there are two types of problems from kinematic point of view. One is what is called forward kinematics. In this, the problem is we compute the position of end effector when joint angles are given. Okay, so that is called forward kinematics. So what happens is, in this case, you have basically three links, three joints, and corresponding to each joint you have some angle theta. Okay, you can call that the joint variable for that particular joint. So theta 1, theta 2, theta 3. So if you are given theta 1, theta 2, theta 3, then you have to tell what will be the position of point A. That is called forward kinematics. Okay, and then there is inverse kinematics, which is to compute joint angles when position of end effector is given. So in this, the position, the XYZ position of point A is given, and now you have to work out what will be the angles theta 1, theta 2 and theta 3 that will give us that particular position of point A. Okay, we have to work out here what will be the values of joint variables, and we may not have a unique solution. There may be multiple solutions that will give us the same position of point A. So that is called inverse kinematics. But regardless of forward or inverse kinematics, first thing is to learn about this mapping from one frame to other.